Thank you, Matthew, and welcome everyone. So first is a quick glance of what we're going to be looking at today. We're first going to cover who we are, for those who are not familiar, why we're here. Then we're going to go over findings for our data privacy research, and finally, what does that mean to you? So for those of you that are not familiar with BuzzBack, we have over 20 years of experience pioneering in interactive and engaging research. Our focus is also consumer-centric, and we work with many of the top global companies across industries, spanning from service, consumer products, pharma, and a number of other ones. Our studies are designed to drive engagement levels and to bring about greater subconscious and emotional understanding, as well as richer insights. And for that purpose, we use a portfolio of award-winning interactive and projective techniques, such as some of the ones shown on the screen right now, eCollage, Thought Bubble. And next, Mary will tell you a little bit about herself and her work.
Thanks, Tatiana and Matthew, for that intro as well. So I've been working in the consumer insights business for nearly 30 years now, and the sole focus of my work has been on understanding who we are and very particularly why we do what we do. Panoramix Global is my business that delivers cultural analysis and trends. And Metametrics is my text analytic platform, helping marketers make use of their first-party data to reveal hidden insights.
All right, thank you, Mary. So now we're going to cover why we're here. Why talk about data privacy? And for that, we thought it would be a good idea to start showing you a short video, which was filmed in Belgium. And the history behind this video is that random people were invited to have their mind read, and they were told it was for an upcoming TV show.
Insecten.
Alsjeblieft.
Ik voel twee insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Is met je spierscheur? Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen, €795.000.
Ja, eigenlijk.
Oh my god. Oh man. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So the video ends with a key message to consumers that their entire life is online and it may be used against them, and for them to be vigilant. And interestingly, while this was recorded in 2012, the data privacy is still a very relevant topic, and we have seen momentum picking up since last year. Mary, maybe can you give us some insights on the current landscape?
Yeah, definitely. You know, our awareness of the dangers of sharing data has been growing, but the pandemic just put all of that on the back burner. The sudden change in our lives meant meeting our needs with technology, and that of course means sharing data. So for shopping, for learning, for connecting with people, healthcare, groceries, working, entertainment, and more. So you know, in that time of real uncertainty for all of us, we had to quickly reorient the way we did so many things, and just unfortunately privacy took a big hit. So it's our desire for that convenience, and in some cases necessity, came into direct conflict with our desire for safety.
All right, thank you, Mary. And then so to help bring how much this matters to life, we wanted to showcase a headline. So the Harvard Business Review had a recent statement that helps really bring this to life, which is privacy is to the digital age what product safety was to the industrial age. And we have also seen a lot in the news about the topic in the recent months, with stories that cover major breaches, hacks, and or initiatives companies are taking towards addressing privacy. Now, it's important to note that data privacy is relevant and crucial across industries, not just for tech. And if we take the World Federation of Advertisers as a great example of that, last year they launched the world's first guide on data ethics for brands. And the interesting thing is that the data ethics board for this group included senior experts from 19 of the world's biggest companies, including AB InBev, Diageo, IKEA, L'Oreal, Mars, Procter & Gamble, Shell, Unilever, and Visa. Mary, is there anything that you're seeing when it comes to this area?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought all of this up, Tatiana, because we think about data privacy in relationship to big tech. And as you can see here, that's just not the case. This is across every sector in the marketplace. And I think what's really important right now is that in general, consumers are paying much more attention to where companies stand on important policies, important issues. And data privacy and data ethics will soon be one of them. So brands that want to protect their brand will take these very high-level, company-wide, top-down approaches to protecting the trust that they have built with their audience.
Thank you, Mary. So in line with what Mary was mentioning and the events of 2020, including tech giants like Microsoft, Google, and Facebook being involved in massive data breach scandals, we underline the need for major privacy or for data privacy in a major way. And that's reflecting how consumers think, because in a recent study, consumers declare that after a breach, 75% would no longer engage with a brand online, and at least half of them would not sign up for online services with that brand. They say they have made changes to how they secure their personal data, and they are more concerned about protecting their personal data versus prior year. However, there's still a disconnect between business leaders and consumers. As an example, in a recent PwC survey, over half of the business leaders say that consumers trust them with their data more now than 2 years ago. But when talking to consumers, only 21% of them actually report increased trust, while almost 3 in 10 say their trust levels are dropping. So that brings us to our current study on data privacy. We did the first wave of the study back in 2019, the most recent one of them this year. And we have interviewed over 10,000 people, so about 1,000 people per market across 5 markets for each of the waves, with an even split of genders and consumers of various age groups starting at 16. And the first thing that we wanted to cover is how many consumers have been personally impacted by data privacy issues. And what we notice is that over the past 2 years, there has been an increase of how many people are impacted by spam, scams, data leaks. And the results are mostly consistent across markets, with a couple of exceptions, as for example, more in China say they suffer leaks compared to personal or to other markets, while more in the UK experience phishing. So what we wanted to do is bring that to life by showing consumers talking about how they were impacted.
I was affected by Experian being hacked and losing personal information. My concern with that was I had no direct contact with Experian.
E-mails, spams, com algumas informações pessoais minhas.
个人信息被泄露的情况很常见，特别是在一些网站你注册之后，你的地理位置信息、你的身份信息，特别是你的手机号码和联系方式。
So what does this do to concern about data sharing? And understandably so, due to the current bad experiences events, we have seen an increase in concern about sharing personal data digitally. At the same time, fewer consumers are certain they know what happens to the personal information they share, and that is especially true in the US and the UK. And playing back to what Mary was saying earlier regarding COVID's impact on data privacy landscape, we also wanted to understand how that impact their concern about sharing data. And what we see is that there's at least 30% of consumers in the UK, Germany, and US who say they are more worried, while more in Brazil and China say the same. On the other hand, interestingly, when we talk about how they think they're going to feel in the future, we see a global divergence. So the majority in China and Brazil say they think they will feel safer in the future, while consumers in other markets are split about how they think they're going to feel. Because of all of this, and obviously understanding, consumers are being more careful. They are definitely thinking more about who they share their personal data with. And we've seen an increase on the results compared to 2019 as well, especially for some of the markets like Germany, UK, and USA, which is a slight indicator of a difference in global experiences between markets. Mary, could you please give us some insights in this area?
Yeah, this is really important. This awareness is really becoming mainstream, and Facebook, Instagram were recently in the news because of the toxic environment that they've created online, particularly doing harm to teens. We've seen documentaries and movies and activists continue to reveal the real story about data and privacy and how that data is used and how we can be coerced. And then there are news stories, of course, about these massive hacking events, cybercrime events, ransomware events. And it just makes all of us think that we could maybe be next.
Indeed, indeed. And then connecting to that, we wanted to look at confidence in laws and regulations. And while it's still at reasonably high levels, there's definitely been a decrease on those who believe that laws and regulations ensure that their data, personal data, is not misused. But Mary, do you have any thoughts when it comes to those regulations?
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas that I think consumers are looking towards for help in protecting their privacy and personal information. And, we see the pace of innovation speeding up, and often around technologies that we just don't really understand all that much. AI, at-home DNA tests, facial recognition, biometrics, voice commands, all these solutions and more are just going to continue to take in more of our data. And as a result, it's coming under more scrutiny and subject to regulation. So, the GDPR that was enacted in 2016, that really sets the stage, I think, for what is to come. But there is still no universal standard around data privacy. And here in the United States, the CCPA was enacted in California in 2018, but the US still has no national privacy law. So calls for action are becoming louder and louder in this area.
Thank you. So as we see that they are more concerned and more aware of their data sharing, consumers are also thinking more about what they share, not just who they share it with. And there are some limitations. So they first think it's acceptable to share things that are crucial for example, navigation to a certain extent, if they have a need to using healthcare apps or fitness tracking. But most importantly for them is that they need to be given permission to what they feel secure can be shared. And on the other hand, they don't think it's appropriate for apps, specifically things related to gaming, dating, or even news and streaming sites to be sharing their personal information. And here we have a couple of verbatims that help bring this to life. So basically they're saying personal data only collected and stored for use of service I requested and not shared externally without my express permission. I think that definitely covers how consumers feel and are feeling towards what should be shared and what should not be shared. And we all know that data sharing only takes one click, and that there is a number of ways that this personal data can be shared, from location sharing, smartwatches, social media, Zoom calls, you name it. So for the next part of the study, what we wanted to do is just cover a few more details on how consumers feel about some of these, specifically location sharing, purchases, and voice activated devices. So the first one we wanted to cover is the location sharing. And that's important because it is connected to a number of services, from your basic GPS tracking to even stores tracking what you're doing as you're inside through their apps. And interestingly, most consumers say that sharing their location data makes them feel vulnerable and stressed. And because of that, fewer are willing to share their location and personal data unless they see value. Interesting, there's about half of them that say that they would be willing to do so to record health data for improving well-being or saving a life. So those are just very personal information that could be shared. And about 30% would be willing to share location if it was they saw value in it. And by that, they mean things such as making their life easier or potentially giving them discounts, as we've seen some car insurance companies doing the tracking device to monitor their driving. Interestingly, though, there's also fewer that know what's being done with their data. They don't know the what, the where, the how, who's using it, and what for. So we've definitely seen an decrease on people who are aware of what their data is being shared for. Next, what about shopping? And when it comes to shopping, trust drives purchase, and nearly all of them say they're more willing to buy from a company that they perceive as properly handling their personal data, and that's especially higher in Germany and Brazil. Some of the ways that they talk about this shopping experience and what's okay is by personalization of services. And while they say that it is okay to a certain extent, we have most of them experiencing target ads, but not everyone is a big fan of it. They say that they mainly get targeted through Facebook or by web searches in YouTube after they've looked for a similar product or service. But some of them say that it makes them a little bit annoyed and uncomfortable because it is a little bit intrusive in the sense that maybe they will be talking to a friend or just do a quick search, and next thing you know, ads are splattered all over their emails and social media, and it's a little bit beyond what they feel comfortable with. But what about voice-activated devices, right? It's interesting because we've heard a lot about them lately, especially when it comes to how much are these devices listening to and how secure are they? And interestingly, when we talk to consumers about it, this verbatim helps bring to life what their thoughts are in terms, as far as I'm aware, it only uses information I give it, but I don't know if it's secretly spying on me. I wouldn't have thought so, but you never know with big tech. So they are using it, but there are some concerns. And this question was only asked in the US and the UK, and over half of them have at least owned a voice-activated device at some point. And of those, 8 in 10 currently use and own it. But the interesting thing is that when thinking about devices or voice-activated devices, most consumers play back to voice assistants such as Alexa or Amazon Echo, but they're ignoring devices such as your smartphone, which is with you all the time and is also voice-activated, or Ring the doorbells or any other smart home tech that is also a voice-activated device. And here is a video of consumers talking about their experience with those.
I have an Amazon Alexa, an Echo, and I use it mostly for radio and playing music, but sometimes for general information and asking where my Amazon deliveries are. Fairly comfortable with it having my personal info because I would prefer a personalized service.
My concerns are that it is always listening. So occasionally there'll be something on TV that triggers it, so I know it is always on and not necessarily just when the lights come on.
I think that the voice-activated systems are great for convenience and making life much easier. The reason I don't trust them and why I got rid of mine is purely because I felt like it was listening into my conversations due to the various advertising I was seeing in relation to conversations I was having in the house, and that made me feel very uneasy.
So despite the high usage, safety is a concern. We have a lot of consumers saying that they use it, but they are still concerned, and they're mostly worried about recording of personal conversations, as you saw from examples from the video, hacking, how long the data is stored for, and to a certain extent, the vulnerability of their voice, as they say there's a possibility that their voice could be used for other purposes they have not authorized. So the next piece we wanted to look at is what about brands? We wanted to know how consumers feel about brands. And interestingly, it seems that big brands such as Apple, Google, and Microsoft are doing it well because consumers are more likely to trust these platforms with their personal information. On the other hand, social media is falling short on trust, which is not surprising given some of these issues that have come to light recently, as Mary was mentioning, the issues with Facebook and some of the other social media platforms. But this is at the heart of the privacy paradox because people still continue to use services they say they don't fully trust. On an interesting positive note, though, Apple has been promoting privacy as a key component of its philosophy and has seen an increase of trust over the last 2 years. So it seems that it's proven to be a smart strategy. On the other hand, the negative views and perceptions of have recently contributed to Facebook changing its name to Meta. The last piece we wanted to do to bring to life the importance of brands and how it relates to brand is a story about Lush, a UK-based cosmetic retailer that is famous for its bath bombs, because that's an example of a brand taking a very strong stand when it comes to data safety and when it comes to data privacy and mental health of its consumers. They recently dropped a social media bomb by saying they would be deactivating a number of its social media accounts, like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Snapchat, until the platforms take action to provide a safer environment for users. Their decision comes despite the potential of significant financial loss, as they say that they risk over 13 million in sales that are generated through social media. And I don't know if you had any additional mentions when it comes to brands, Mary.
Just that there's been a really interesting development in brands that are trying to create and promote and sell privacy-focused services like DuckDuckGo, which many of you probably heard of, is a search service that won't track you. There's Proton Mail that is end-to-end encrypted mail. And there is a service called Brave, which is a privacy-focused web browser. So there are just more, there's more interest, more entrepreneurs out there trying to address this as well.
All right, great. So in sum, what we wanted to do is just give you some of the key insights and what to do in terms of looking ahead. So in essence, some consumers are more aware and involved with data trust, and therefore data trust is falling. There's no doubt that COVID has pushed for fast change in the consumer behavior and the evolution of data access. The data privacy landscape is changing in response to public outcry, and companies need to take privacy seriously and be at the forefront of changes. They can't wait, or it will impact loyalty. So take as an example the big tech companies such as Google and Apple that are making data privacy part of their value proposition to consumers. And data privacy is important across all industries, not just tech. So consumer-facing companies need to understand the link between data privacy and customer trust and loyalty. Some of the major factors driving change is obviously COVID, as we've been mentioning it. Not only did it bring to life because of changes, but it actually pushed consumers to be more reliant on everything that is mobile, both in terms of banking and doctor's appointments, schooling, and even working from home. So that has put a major light on how their data is being shared. More consumers across all generations are relying on a mobile device. So things that used to be used for just communication and photos are now shifting into all of these day-to-day activities. So just imagine you not having your phone or you losing your phone. Most people can't stay away from their mobile phone for more than a few hours, let alone not having that as part of their day-to-day life. And that's what's pushing some of those concerns and awareness. And lastly, think about the younger generations growing up. So Gen Z is now in the workforce and they know the privacy game. We have done studies on Gen Z in the past and we know how they are, and they're a lot more engaged and a lot more concerned about the impact that data privacy or data sharing has in their life. And soon Gen Alpha will be following behind. So what are 3 things that you can do when thinking about data privacy in your company? So the first one is identify where you stand with your consumers. So where does your brand stand when it comes to the trust paradigm? What do you stand for? And what trust is already there? Obviously, that's a little harder for emerging brands, but you need to focus on where you stand with your consumers. Many of our brand health studies, for example, do ask about privacy and how consumers feel about different aspects of their life being shared with companies. So the second thing would be determine where trust can be built. What are your opportunities in messaging, in communication, product positioning, claims, you name it. Test messaging, visuals, articulations. But what is important is, what is the acceptable tone? Be transparent. It's not just what you say, but how you say it is very important as well. Is it going to be believable? Do they connect to the brand? And third, make it ongoing. So it's important to continue to take pulses on what you're doing, and if you're building trust and moving the needle. It doesn't take much. We can have ongoing mobile pulse studies, for example, around consumer perception. It doesn't need to be more than a 5-10 minute mobile checkpoint with consumers, but make sure that you always make it ongoing and knowing how they feel about it, what's okay as the landscape is constantly changing. And that is in essence for us. So I'll pass it back to Matthew for a few questions.
Thank you very much, both. Really fascinating stuff, and I think quite reassuring from my point of view to see that I'm not completely paranoid. I'm actually a fairly typical consumer when it comes to these worries. But and thanks to everyone for your questions. We do have a few. So somebody's asked, how do brands maintain and drive trust when journeys are becoming increasingly more digital?
I think that plays right back to what we're just covering, Matthew, in terms of you need to make ongoing, right? You need to continue to check in with your consumers as things are changing. What are they feeling comfortable with at the moment? How are you communicating to them? Make sure that you are transparent, that you know and you get authorization from them on what's okay to be doing or not, both in terms of what you are sharing and what in terms of what you're consuming, because you may not be somebody that is collecting the data, but you may be using the data that is collected. So just be respectful, be aware, and make an ongoing touch points to understand how things are changing and how they're perceiving your brand.
Thank you. Another question here. So how do these changes, I guess, in attitudes around privacy, how do these changes impact primary researchers, particularly when capturing video responses?
Okay, so I think in terms of research in general, there are not necessarily a ton of changes because everything we do is confidential. We would never share information of participants with our partner companies or with the sponsors of the research. So that we start with the privacy from that point on, right? We share the information and whatnot. But when it comes to the videos, we make it optional, first of all, but we inform participants up front. And I think that that's crucial for brands to understand it when they are going to conduct research. First of all, it's optional. They need to be okay with sharing the video and with sharing the information, but it also goes beyond that. We'll give them the information that the video will only be used for informational purposes. We would never, for example, pick a video from a research point of view and use it on a Facebook advertisement or as a testimonial. It is only to bring the voice of the consumer to life for our partnering companies, but not something that would be made public, and we make that very clear to participants, but it's always optional as well, so aligned with their need to provide authorization.
Thank you. We've got time for one more. Thank you for all your questions. We have quite a few actually, so thanks for your engagement. We will get to you if we don't get to your question, but I've got time for one more, and it's how does age play a factor in brand trust?
Matthew, I'll take that one. And I'd like to start just with seniors, because we know that healthcare costs are rising and there's lots of technology available to seniors and maturers in order for them to stay in their homes. But surveillance is actually a part of all of this technology. And so this surveillance may be the trade-off for them to be able to age in place. So that's one end of the spectrum, or rather of ages. An interesting report from Gallup recently showed that young people, no big surprise here, are more likely than others to use digital media, but they are more likely than others to distrust and to find that trust in digital media. And this is, again, that paradox that Tatiana brought up. Another interesting study from Viacom CBS showed that 2/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds are fine with data collection as long as companies are transparent about how they use it. So Tatiana, that goes directly to what you were just explaining. And interestingly here too, from the same study, 91% of Gen Z believe that it is a human right to know what information companies are collecting about them. So I think that that's something to really take into consideration when developing those strategies.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Tatiana. That's all we have time for. And actually, this is the, perhaps unsurprisingly, the last webinar of the year. We have some exciting plans for next year. I'm really excited about what we've got coming up. And hopefully we will see you at another webinar next year. Thanks both, and thanks to our audience. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.